It was the summer of 1993 in Sedona, Arizona, and the small desert town was alive with something electric and exciting. By the early 90s, Sedona had become internationally known as a center for New Age spirituality, largely due to the belief that certain locations around the Red Rocks contained energy vortexes, places thought to emit heightened spiritual or metaphysical energy. Those searching for healing, rebirth, and transformation hiked to the vortex sites at sunrise, meditated beneath towering formations, and tried to channel the energy they believed the land itself held. But while tourists flocked to the Red Rocks looking for the intangible, something far more common and devastating was unfolding behind closed doors. Inside a modest two-bedroom home on Coffee Pot Drive, 32-year-old Stephanie Wasilishin was shot in the neck at point-blank range. Her two daughters were in the home with her at the time, Nicole, who was 10, and Christina, who was only 3. The only other adult there was Stephanie's live-in boyfriend, Russell Peterson. In the days that followed, Russell told investigators more than one version of what happened inside that house. First, he framed it as an accident during a struggle after Stephanie allegedly threatened him. Later, his account shifted, and he claimed he was in the hallway when the gun went off, and that he believed Stephanie had intentionally taken her own life. But the physical evidence tells a story that is hard to reconcile with any of Russell's versions of events. And then there are the voices in this case that we cannot ignore, because that night, a 3-year-old child would tell police, Papi killed her. Stephanie's oldest daughter, Nicole, has never believed her mother's death was an accident or self-inflicted, and she has spent years trying to get the case looked at again, pushing for answers, pushing for accountability. Because what happened at Coffee Pot Drive didn't just take her mother from her, it reshaped Nicole's entire life. Today, we are going to walk through all of it. Stephanie's life, the accounts of what happened that night, the evidence, and the contradictions. Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel, and thank you for joining me for another true crime deep dive. As a heads up, this case is going to be in 2 parts. I wanted to get it into 1 part because I've noticed that views fall off after the first part and not as many people watch the second part, but this case is very important. So I'm going to tell you that it will be in 2 parts, that part 2 will be up within days of part 1, and I'm asking you please, because this case is so important. And I've worked with Stephanie's daughter, Nicole, to put this case together. Please, if you watch part 1, please watch part 2, because I think that everybody needs to hear what happened in this case. And there's going to be a call to action, how you can help actually get Nicole's mother, Stephanie's case looked at again. If you are coming to this video a few weeks late, part 2 will be linked in the description box so you can navigate your way there very easily. Okay, so how to start this video was difficult for me to figure out because of the complexities, the gray areas in this case. And there's a phrase that comes up again and again in true crime, the idea of the perfect victim, someone innocent, someone gentle, someone without enemies or flaws, a person who lit up the room when they walked into it. You know what I'm talking about. But the reality is, most people don't live their lives that way. Some people are difficult. Some people are volatile. Some are deeply wounded and carry that pain into their relationships and throughout their lives. They make choices that complicate how others see them. The reality is there's no such thing as the perfect victim. Sometimes the people who were murdered lived complicated lives. They made mistakes. They hurt people. They were hurt by people. They weren't universally liked, and they may have engaged in behaviors that were messy, reactive, or even toxic at times. And when someone like that dies under suspicious or controversial circumstances, we find that the case often becomes far more convoluted than it ever needed to be, because instead of asking what happened, the focus quietly shifts to who they were and whether their life somehow justifies the outcome. Their past becomes evidence. Their personality becomes a motive. But justice was never meant to be reserved for people who were perfect or easy to love. In this case, we're going to talk about the death of Stephanie Wasilishin, a woman whose personal life has been dissected, judged, and in many ways used against her. And we're going to examine how much of that scrutiny is relevant and how much of it has muddied the waters. So, very important that what I just said sinks in, and we're going to talk about everything. We're going to start from the beginning, as we always do. But first, let's have a word from the sponsor of today's video, Surfshark VPN. I think a lot of us think of VPNs purely in terms of privacy or security, which is important. But one of the things I really like about Surfshark VPN is how useful it is for everyday entertainment, especially if you stream a lot of content, which I do. And we probably all do. Let's be honest. It's winter for most of the world right now. It feels like a winter storm came in and everybody's cold and snowed in. So we're streaming a lot of content. And Surfshark is a VPN that encrypts your internet traffic and helps protect your personal information, but it also lets you access content that's normally restricted based on your location. And that's huge if you've ever searched for a show or a movie only to realize it's available in another country, just not where you live. With Surfshark, you can connect to servers in 100 different countries. They're actually the only VPN to reach that milestone, which means you can unlock different streaming libraries on platforms like Netflix, as well as access services like BBC iPlayer, Hulu, and more when you're traveling or living abroad. If you watch a lot of documentaries, like I do, a lot of international series, like I do, or true crime content, like I do, this is honestly a game changer. What makes it even better is how simple it is to use. You don't have to be tech savvy, which I'm not, or mess with complicated settings. You turn Surfshark on, it automatically connects you to the best available server, and you're good to go. And one subscription works on unlimited devices at the same time. This is huge. So phones, laptops, tablets, smart TVs, Rokus, all of these things. So you can protect and stream on everything in your household without juggling logins or upgrades or trying to sign another device in and being told you've reached your device limit. We've all been there with Netflix, haven't we? And beyond entertainment, Surfshark still checks all the important boxes when it comes to privacy. They have strict no logs policy, meaning they don't track your activity. There's also Surfshark Alert, which notifies you if your email or personal information shows up in a data breach, and an email scam checker that helps you spot phishing attempts before you accidentally click something sketchy. Once again, I think we've all been there. And then we have this terrifying, constant thought that like we've clicked a link we shouldn't have, and where's our information now? Who's got it? Do we have to change all our passwords? We don't know what to do. And if you travel or even just use public Wi-Fi at places like hotels, airports, or coffee shops, Surfshark adds another layer of protection by encrypting your data, so things like passwords and private messages aren't exposed. They also make it very low risk and easy to try. Surfshark offers 24/7 customer support, which I have used in the middle of the night before, and they don't even seem mad that you're calling them in the middle of the night. They also have a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you can test it out and see how it fits into your life and routine without feeling locked in. So if you think you want to try Surfshark out for yourself, which you should, if you're looking into getting a VPN, Surfshark's the one. All you have to do is go to surfshark.com/stephanieharlowe and use code stephanieharlowe to get 4 extra months of Surfshark VPN. Once again, that's surfshark.com/stephanieharlowe and use code stephanieharlowe at checkout to get 4 extra months of Surfshark. The link in the code are in the description box if you need it, whether you're using it for privacy, travel, or unlocking more entertainment options, especially streaming content you already pay for. Surfshark VPN is one of those tools that once you start using it, you're going to wonder how you went without it. Thank you so much to Surfshark for sponsoring today's video, and let's dive in. Stephanie Marie Wasilishin was born on June 1st, 1961 in Chicago to her parents Bernice and Harry. One of 5 siblings, Stephanie actually had a twin brother, Stephen, who sadly passed away at just 7 months old from the measles. The tragedy in Stephanie's life was not over by any stretch of the imagination because when she was a teenager, her father suddenly had a heart attack and died. By this time, the family had already located to Phoenix, Arizona, and Stephanie's mother quickly remarried to another man named Bruce. According to Stephanie's close friend, Lori Swift, both Stephanie's mother, Bernice, and her husband, Bruce, they liked to drink, and they did a lot of it. Bernice went by B, a nickname, and Lori called her the Wicked Witch of Windros. This was a moniker inspired by their address at the time, 2917 West Windros. B was a complicated woman. She could either be found drunk at her kitchen table or watching her soap operas on the television with a cigarette in her hand, a time during which everyone in the house knew they had better be quiet, even though the soap operas were recorded and could be, rewound if she missed something. But once again, B was kind of volatile, kind of always drunk. So I think that the people in her life and in her home, especially her children, knew that they shouldn't set her off. So when I read quotes from her friends, especially the friends from her early life, you will hear some of them refer to her as Stacy. So just keep in mind whether I'm saying Stephanie or they're saying Stacy, we're talking about the same person. Lori Swift said, quote, Stacy grew up as the scapegoat in a house that had a lot of chaos, with a parent that drank on the regular. Her mom would tell her mean things, such as the wrong twin died. Stacy never got over that the wrong twin died, because her mom never let her forget it. Stacy would be standing at the kitchen sink doing dishes. Stacy always having to do everybody else's fucking chores too while I'm talking about it, with her mom running her mouth about whatever the topic was that night. And it was very difficult to go over to her house and have a good time because having a parent that drinks, they can be a bit obnoxious at times. However, the Wicked Witch of Windros did allow us teenagers to have parties at her house, and then the Wasilishin house got a swimming pool, end quote. Stephanie's friend Lori said that the parties at the house would get pretty wild, but when the keg would be delivered early, Stephanie's brothers would have to hide it because if their mother B saw it, she would want to tap it early before anyone even got there. Lori also said that Stephanie and their friends didn't really like B's husband, Bruce. Quote, I don't know, he was a creeper. He was a creeper. You get that feeling about somebody and your hair stands up. He was a little too touchy-feely in my opinion, and in stories I heard from my friend, he had a problem keeping his hands to himself, end quote. When Lori's talking about her friend or referring to her friend, she's talking about Stephanie. So when Stephanie was 16 in the summer of 1977, she went to live with her aunt and uncle in Downers Grove, Illinois, where she remained and attended school there for about a year. Now, there were rumors that her stepfather Bruce had been sexually abusing Stephanie, that she'd gotten pregnant, and she'd been sent away to either have the baby and then give the baby up for adoption or terminate her pregnancy. We will come back to this a few times throughout the videos, but Cheryl Mendel met and befriended Stephanie that summer, and according to Cheryl and her account of the time they spent together, it does not appear that Stephanie was pregnant at any time, which means she most likely did not give birth to a child. I don't know whether Stephanie was pregnant and she terminated the pregnancy, but it doesn't seem that she carried a pregnancy to full term and then gave that child up for adoption. Cheryl said, quote, I never knew why Stacy was sent to her aunt and uncle in Downers Grove, Illinois. I overheard someone saying that she was there because she wasn't getting along with her family in Arizona at the time. At 15 years old, I accepted that answer and I just never questioned it, end quote. At some point, the marriage with Bruce ended and Stephanie's mother B remarried again, this time to a man named Reginald Evans. And from all accounts, he was a really good guy. He was very sweet, very soft-spoken, and very good to Stephanie. Lori Swift said that when Reginald Evans entered the picture, life for Stephanie improved, but no matter who B was married to, Lori and Stephanie were always having a good time, getting the most they could out of life and being young. In grade school, Stephanie enjoyed track and field days the most, and this is where she won events and came home with ribbons. Her friend Lori said, quote, we started cutting classes in grade school to lay in the sun. Summers were filled with baby oil, laying in the sun with lemon juice in our hair. Being in Arizona wasn't hot enough for us, so we laid out in the sun on the roof of Tracy's house. That's where we'd smoke joints too. There was a mass amount of Aquanet hairspray used because every girl wanted hair like Farrah Fawcett, end quote. And some people might wonder why you would be putting lemon juice in your hair, and it's because you were not raised in the 90s, because my mom did that to me too. She put lemon juice in my hair and then would tell me to lay out in the sun, and it would give me highlights, and it actually did work for some reason. I'm not sure the exact science of it or the mechanics of it, but it absolutely works. Now, if there was one thing no one could deny, it was that Stephanie Wasilishin was beautiful. She was tall with long legs and flowing blonde hair and a dazzling smile that would make even Farrah Fawcett jealous. Lori Swift said, quote, "Growing up, she always had a boyfriend. The boys would line up for Stacy. She always had more than one ask to go to the dance, and it was pretty cool." End quote. Stephanie saved money she earned from a job working at a daycare center to purchase her first car, which was a used 1976 or 1977 turquoise Gremlin with no AC, but according to Lori Swift, quote, "a good stereo and kick-ass speakers," end quote. The only problem was, when Stephanie bought the car, she had no idea how to drive. She didn't even have her driver's license. And so she and her friends, they had to keep the car a secret while she learned to drive it on the down low, blasting Aerosmith and Journey as she went. She got the hang of it pretty quickly, and then the town of Phoenix was Stephanie's oyster. Lori said, quote, "She'd drive us to Thunderbird High School and all over. Back in the day, we could leave school campus for lunch. Oh my God, we thought we were so cool. We did a lot of cruising around our community called Westtown and Metro Center Mall. One night, we drove the Gremlin to a bad area called Maryville and ran out of gas. Stacy and I had to push the Gremlin across multiple lanes of traffic, barefoot and in shorts. We looked like Fred Flintstone pushing the Gremlin into a gas station on Grand and Indian School. Lucky for us, some dudes ran over to help push. Our big boobs and shorts always helped." End quote. Stephanie was a typical wild teenager growing up in the 70s. She and her friends went to concerts as much as they could. They hung out at the mall food court and snuck cigarettes. They let their hair down at house parties and desert parties out in the desert. And Stephanie was a voracious reader, often escaping her tumultuous home life through book after book. Now, after high school, Stephanie's brother Mike was working in construction when he introduced her to a coworker named Craig Daly. So Craig and Stephanie dated for a few years before Stephanie became pregnant with her first daughter, Nicole, who would be born in 1983. From the get-go, Craig was head over heels for Stephanie, and he truly felt that she was his soulmate. Even at that time, Stephanie and Lori Swift were still good friends. Both of their husbands worked in construction, they both had young daughters, and they would all hang out occasionally together. Growing up with very little money, Stephanie had learned how to stretch a dollar from a young age. She was always a hard worker, and she was meticulous as far as how she kept and cleaned her living space. She also loved decorating her home, especially for the holidays. Now, to me, learning about Stephanie's early life, her family dynamics, and then who she became as a wife and a mother and an adult, this all suggests a hypervigilant nervous system. It speaks to a little girl who grew up with emotionally volatile adult caregivers who had very little control over what happened to her body and her space, and that translated into an adult woman who desired a strong need for order. For someone who lacked safety early on, control over their space can feel like control over their life. And Stephanie also loved the Hallmark Channel. And for those of you that don't know, this is a very specific type of programming. Hallmark movies are built around predictable fairy tale-like story arcs where families show up for each other, relationships are safe and loving, and any conflict quickly reaches a guaranteed and satisfying resolution by the end of the movie. And I think that Stephanie was drawn to these representations of stability and care because for someone who grew up in chaos, that kind of predictability can be deeply comforting. It doesn't mean she believed in fairy tales or wanted a fairy tale. It means she was drawn to the idea of safety, of a home where nothing suddenly falls apart and love doesn't have to be earned or survived. Nicole Wasilishin. She is Stephanie's daughter. She was 10 years old when Stephanie was killed, and she's become a warrior for her mother's case, to get it reopened, to get it relooked at, to raise awareness for it, which is what we're doing here. Nicole has created an entire podcast, Papi Killed Mommy, which you can find wherever you find your podcasts. It's excellent. I highly suggest you checking it out. You can also follow her on TikTok. I'll put all the links in the description box. But Nicole was very young when her mother died. She was only 10 years old. And although she didn't have a ton of time with her, and although she was young when her mother left this world, Nicole warmly remembers her mother as a beautiful woman who took a lot of pride in her appearance. She said Stephanie lived for the small moments, especially those she shared with her children. She encouraged Nikki to read, always buying her the newest R.L. Stine book, and she would place it on Nikki's bed for her to find when she came home. And Nikki has a very distinctive memory of her mother from when she was 5, and it made me laugh, so I wanted to share it with you. They were at Nikki's grandmother's, so Stephanie's mother's, Bee's house for a summer get-together when a neighbor had shouted over to Stephanie asking her what her favorite color was. And Nikki said, quote, "She took a drag off her cigarette and responded very coolly, 'Green, because it's the color of weed and money.'" End quote. So from what I can tell, Stephanie Wasilishin was just a very cool and unique person, strong-willed, unapologetically herself, marching to the beat of her own drum, independent and intent on breaking generational curses. But how does that saying go? We make plans and God laughs, right? No matter how carefully we map out our lives, who we'll love, where we'll end up, how things are supposed to go, reality has its own agenda. Not in a cruel way necessarily, but often in a humbling one. It's a reminder that control is always partial and certainty is mostly an illusion. Often our own choices, other people's choices, systems, timing, randomness, that all collides with the dreams we crafted in ways we cannot anticipate. I also think that the phrase, we make plans and God laughs, it carries a quiet grief in it. It acknowledges that you can do your best, you can want the right things, you can try to build something stable, and you can still lose it all. In the mid-1980s, Stephanie was working at the Sheraton Crescent Hotel in Phoenix when she met a young and aspiring chef who worked at the hotel named Russell Bennett Peterson. Unlike Stephanie's boyfriend at the time, Craig, who was a simple kind of blue-collar man, Russell Peterson was fast-talking and charming. He presented himself as cultured, with big dreams of one day owning his own restaurant. And it was through Russell that Stephanie developed an interest in baking and began her career as a pastry chef. Now, according to Craig, Stephanie's boyfriend and Nikki's father, Russell wined and dined Stephanie, sweeping her off her feet and ending the relationship between Craig and Stephanie. Nikki was only 3 or 4 at the time, but she says she remembers that her father had a very hard time letting her mother go. Craig acknowledges that he struggled with losing Stephanie to Russell, saying, quote, "I beat him up one time and scared the hell out of him another couple of times. I was jealous. I wanted her back because she was more than just a girlfriend. She was a buddy." End quote. By 1989, Stephanie and Russell had a daughter together, Christina, Nikki's half-sister, and they lived in an apartment together in Phoenix. Nikki said that for a short time it felt like a real family. She told me that Russell was never mean to her or anything, but then again, he wasn't really around a lot to begin with. He was a workaholic and an alcoholic. He didn't really want to spend a ton of time at home, and she would only see him on his days off. She said, quote, "He was decent, very quiet, spoke Italian, and would call me Nicolette. I mean, honestly, I didn't hate him as a child, but I had no reason to love him. He didn't go out of his way to bond with me." End quote. In 1990 or 1991, Russell was offered the position of executive chef at Pietro's restaurant in Sedona, Arizona. Sedona sits about 2 hours north of Phoenix, close enough to stay connected, I suppose, but far away enough for Stephanie to be isolated from her family and her friends that she'd known almost all of her life. She began working at Pietro's as well as their pastry chef, but she was never really happy in Sedona. According to the people who knew her, Stephanie never had major career aspirations. She wanted a partner she could call her own, a home she could call her own, a safe place to tuck her children into bed at night. She just wanted a good life, but Russell was very focused on work and he was gone a lot of the time. Stephanie felt alone. She felt that she and the kids were low on Russell's priority list and she let him and everyone else know it. We're going to come back to that, but first let's go to July 8th, 1993. Both Russell and Stephanie worked at Pietro's that day. They went in together around noon and Stephanie left work around 5 p.m. On her podcast, Papi Killed Mommy, Nikki said, quote, "I remember that day, July 8th, so clearly. My sister and I were playing in the garden, running through the sunflowers that were taller than us. My mom loved to garden, growing the biggest sunflowers and pumpkins. It was one of those beautiful Sedona evenings, the kind you never forget. My mom came home from work at 5:30 p.m. and spent the evening on the phone. She talked to my Aunt Wendy about how lonely and financially strained she felt. Then she called my dad at 8:06 p.m., and they spoke for 107 minutes. It was the kind of phone call that would set off a chain of events that would eventually end with her death." End quote. So obviously, Stephanie and her ex, Craig Daly, they would still talk from time to time. They shared a daughter together, after all, and he felt no animosity towards her in spite of how things had ended. Craig said that, yes, it was true they'd been romantically involved in the past, they had dated, but they'd always been friends, and once the relationship was over, they had stayed friends. Craig, who was still back in Phoenix, he said that although he never knew when she was going to call, Stephanie did reach out to him from time to time. Nikki has since talked to her father about the phone call on the evening of July 8th, and she asked him what he and Stephanie had talked about. Craig said that it started off basic and normal, like, "Hey, how are you doing? What's going on?" All that stuff. And then Stephanie told him that she wanted to come back. Craig said, quote, "I didn't have a girlfriend or anything, and that sounded pretty good to me. So I said, sure, I talked to her for about an hour, maybe over an hour. It was getting into some personal stuff because I lived with her for years, had a kid with her and stuff. Yeah, that's how that started. And she told me some pretty weird stuff about how the boyfriend she had now was wetting the bed, and he had to sleep on the couch, and he was extra weird, and she was having some kind of little affair with a pizza delivery guy because he couldn't do anything or whatever. She was just sick of him. Then she went on to tell me that he had a recorder on the phone line, and she knew it, and she didn't care. She went on to talk about some real personal stuff, and then she went on talking about coming back, and she didn't care about the recording thing. And the rest of the stuff I really can't tell you because it was real personal stuff." End quote. So we got a lot of information just now, and let's break it down. So Stephanie had told her ex, Craig, Nikki's father, that she wanted to get back together. And she talked about how the man she was currently with, Russell Peterson, was getting weird, right? Russell was sleeping on the couch because apparently he was wetting the bed and he couldn't perform sexually. So Stephanie had been having a little affair with the pizza man. Now, it's true, Stephanie was having somewhat of an affair at that time, but it wasn't with the pizza guy. It was with a man named Chuck Cash, a contractor who had done some repairs at the house. I think that he had put in a new carpet or something. Now, apparently this affair was happening because Stephanie and her boyfriend Russell had not been intimate in 7 months, which is what Stephanie's sister Wendy would later tell police she and her sister had talked about the night Stephanie died. Stephanie had told Wendy that she'd arranged for Nikki and Christina to be out of the house that night so she and Russell could have some alone time and hopefully reignite the flame. However, according to Craig and other sources, this may not have been an alone time sort of thing. Like, the reason that Stephanie and Russell were not having success in the bedroom was not because they didn't have enough time alone, but for another reason, which is that Russell Peterson drank a lot. And that's where the bedwetting thing comes in. Nikki told me that she remembers as a child asking her mother why they had a blanket on the couch, and Stephanie told her it was because their dog peed on the couch. Later, Nikki found out that her mother had told other people, other adults, like her own mother and her sister and Nikki's father, Craig, that Russell would get so blackout drunk, he would urinate everywhere, on the bed, on the couch, even on the windowsill. Now, I'm not sure if Russell was sleeping on the couch because of the peeing thing or because there were intimacy issues, but either way, undoubtedly, there were some major issues with Russell's drinking. Craig also said that Stephanie told him that Russell had been recording her phone calls using some kind of call recorder that she'd found in the house. Craig said, quote, "It was just in another room under a pillow or blanket. He tried to hide it the best he could, but she was wondering where the cord went to. It was just something you plug into another jack. Back then, everyone had landlines, and you could plug a recorder in one of those landlines, and it picks up the whole recording." End quote. Now, apparently, according to Craig, Stephanie hadn't told her boyfriend Russell that she'd found the recorder. Like, she hadn't told him that she knew he was recording her phone calls, even though she knew it was there and likely picking up her phone call at that exact moment with her ex, Craig. She told Craig that she didn't care, and this was one of the reasons why he thought she was serious about coming back this time. And yes, I said this time because according to Craig, Stephanie had considered leaving Russell Peterson and getting back together with Craig 2 times previous to this. The first time when Stephanie wanted to get back together, Craig had been in a relationship with another woman. And then the second time happened a few years later, but then I guess Stephanie had changed her mind and she told Craig that she loved Russell and that she just couldn't leave him. Craig had been disappointed when that happened, but this time he believed that Stephanie was serious and that she was genuinely done trying to make things work with Russell Peterson. Craig claimed that outside of the kitchen, as far as like it came to chefing and cooking and being, good at preparing food, Russell was pretty unhelpful to Stephanie. And Craig said, quote, "He can't do anything. He can't fix a door. He can't clean the trap under the sink. He was absolutely helpless when it came to anything under the roof or basic necessities of living in a house or an apartment. He can't do anything. She said she missed that with me because I could fix whatever," end quote. Because remember, Craig Daly was in construction, and from all accounts, what I've heard from people who knew him, he was actually really good, very talented, building things and fixing things. He was definitely good at that. So by the end of their phone call at 9:53 p.m., Stephanie had told Craig that she was ready to pack up her 2 daughters and leave, and he expected to see her the following morning. 37 minutes after hanging up with Craig around 10:30 p.m., Stephanie called her sister Wendy back. Because remember, Stephanie had been on the phone with her sister Wendy before she called Craig. And after she called Wendy back, she and Wendy spoke for about another 35 minutes. During that conversation, Wendy described her sister's mood as happy. Now, if you looked at the phone records from the Coffee Pot Drive house that night, you would see all of these calls listed. You would also see another call, one that went out to Craig Daly again at 11:20 p.m. Put a pin in that. We're going to come back to it, of course. But by 11 p.m., 20 minutes before that second call went out to Craig Daly, 3-year-old Christina was already asleep in her bedroom, and 10-year-old Nikki went into the living room to say goodnight to her mother for what would be the last time, even though she didn't know it. Nikki said at this time her mother was sitting on the couch, relaxing with a drink. The lights were low, the TV was on, a candle was lit, and Nikki walked up behind Stephanie to give her a hug around the neck and a kiss on the cheek. Nikki then left the living room, walked through the kitchen and laundry room hallway before turning left and walking down a quick 3 steps into her bedroom, which was a converted garage. Because remember earlier, I said that the Coffee Pot Drive house was a 2-bedroom house. It was a 2-bedroom house technically. In one bedroom, that would be the master bedroom. That's where Stephanie slept, and Russell, I guess, when he wasn't peeing the bed. And then in the other bedroom was where Christina, the 3-year-old, slept. I'm going to show you an outline or kind of like a map of what this house looked like in a minute. But then there was the garage that had been converted into Nikki's bedroom. So she goes to bed around 11 p.m. 15 minutes later, Nikki heard Russell Peterson return home from work, and after that, she drifted into a peaceful sleep, hearing nothing until she was abruptly woken up by the Sedona police officers hours later. The police officers told Nikki to get up and get dressed. They said that her mother and stepfather had been in a fight and that her mother was staying at a friend's house. On her podcast, Nikki said, quote, "I followed the officer out of my room, through the kitchen and the dining nook into the living room, where I saw Russell Peterson rocking back and forth, talking fast. His hands were red. An officer tried to block my view, but I saw it. What I can only assume now as an adult was my mom's blood all over his hands." End quote. Because as Nikki would come to find out, her mother was not staying at a friend's house because, Stephanie and Russell had argued and she'd had to go and stay somewhere else. No, she was at that moment lying on the floor of the master bedroom, dead. shot in the neck. So Nikki was led outside to the back of a squad car, and when they opened the door for her to get in, she saw that her little sister Christina was already inside, clutching tightly to a stuffed animal that the police had given her. Nikki said that Christina looked at her with wide eyes and told her, "Papi killed Mommy." So, what happened between 11 p.m., when the house was dimly lit and everything was peaceful and relaxed, and 2 a.m., when two little girls would have their worlds turned upside down? To begin to understand that, we should listen to a 911 call made at 1:40 a.m. by Russell Peterson.
911, what's your emergency?
I need help.
What kind of help, sir?
There has been a very bad accident.
Okay, how many vehicles?
No, but there's no vehicle. Me and my wife, we were in an argument, and she's hurt. She's hurt very bad. I need help.
Okay, what's wrong with her?
She's been shot.
She was shot?
Yes.
Who shot her?
We were... I don't know.
You don't know who shot her?
She might have shot herself.
Okay. Yeah. How old is she?
She's 31 years old, 32.
32?
Yeah.
And where is she at right now?
She's in our bedroom.
Okay. Is that a house or is that a company?
It's a house.
Okay. And is she conscious?
No.
She's unconscious?
Yes.
Is she breathing?
No, it doesn't look like she's breathing.
Okay, stay on the line. I'm going to connect the PD to you, and I'm going to get the paramedics going, okay?
She needs help.
What is your name?
My name is Russell Peterson.
Do you know how to do CPR?
No, but I don't.
Okay, stay on the line with me. Just a moment.
Okay.
Mr. Peterson, where is she shot? Pardon me?
It looks like she's been shot in the neck or the chest.
In the neck or the chest?
Yeah.
Okay, we had a fight in progress, a dispute, husband-wife dispute. The wife is shot in either the chest or the neck, unconscious. Where at? Okay, and who are you?
I'm Russell Peterson.
Okay, are you involved in this?
Yes, I am.
Okay, did you do the shooting or who did?
No, I didn't do the shooting. He shot at me. We had a little bit of an argument, and it went kind of back and forth, and it just kind of went off.
Okay, Russell, I want you to stay on the phone with me, all right?
Okay. No, we had a little bit of an argument, and then she came. I have one loaded gun in the house. And she came in and she shot one time at me, and then we kind of had a little bit of a... we fought over the gun, and it went off.
Mr. Peterson, I'm still with you. Where is he from where you are right now?
He's right in front of me.
Are you the only one there?
I've got my daughter right here.
Okay. We need to verify if she is conscious.
No.
Can she respond to you? Is she breathing?
No.
Okay. Okay. What I want you to do, we need to start CPR.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Can your daughter do CPR? How old is she?
She's 3 years old.
Okay. Then you're going to have to do this. You're going to have to be listening to me on the phone and trying to do it. Okay.
I'm listening to you.
Okay. Can you get the phone near her?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay, on that 911 call, and there's more to play, I just wanted to cut in here, we heard Russell say there's been an accident. He and his wife had been in an argument, she was shot, and when asked who shot her, Russell says he doesn't know. He may have shot her, she may have shot herself. He says they had a little bit of an argument, she came in and fired at him once, and then they fought over the gun, and it went off. Remember that he says we fought over the gun. And it went off. You can also hear the voice of a child in the background. That is Stephanie and Russell's 3-year-old daughter, Christina. And I don't need to paint a picture for you to make it understood how absolutely tragic and traumatic that is, because Russell says that Stephanie is right in front of him. And so we can assume Christina is in the same room with him, seeing exactly what he is seeing. I'm going to play another clip from the 911 call. Listen closely to the very beginning of it. Listen to what Christina says to Russell.
No.
Alarms responding personnel. Be advised, patient is unconscious. Not breathing. We're starting CPR session.
Now, it is hard to make out, but it sounds very much like Christina said to her father something like, "You shot mommy." And he responds with an emphatic no. "You shot mommy. No." Absolutely a gut punch to hear that, but this is all important. It is all important. So Russell is then instructed to perform CPR on Stephanie, and Russell gets very panicked, understandably. If I was in that situation, I too would be, kind of anxious about what was going on and scared and confused, not knowing what to do. And then if I'm told to do something like CPR, which I have no idea how to do CPR, I'm also going to feel a little bit like, am I the right person for this job kind of thing? But Russell gets really panicky. He's like, "I just need help."
No, she needs help.
I know.
Yeah.
And you're okay.
We need help real bad.
Okay. They are coming, but I need for you to do this for me, okay? Okay, is her head tilted back? Mrs. Peterson?
What's me?
Okay, is it tilted back?
I'm trying.
Okay. If her head is tilted back, then what I need for you to do is pinch her neck.
There's too much stuff around.
What do you mean there's too much stuff around?
There's a lot of stuff.
Is it coming out of the mouth?
Yeah, it's coming out of everywhere.
Okay. Is it coming out of the mouth? If so, we need to clear it out.
Okay. Let me try. Please go into the bedroom.
And this is just so hard to hear and process. And I do find myself feeling bad for this guy. As we're going to find out, Stephanie Wasilishin was shot in the neck. And when Russell says there's too much stuff around, he's referring to blood and all the other things that come along with this type of injury. And once again, when he's asked if there is something coming out of her mouth, you can hear 3-year-old Christina in the most heart-wrenching, sweet baby voice say, "Oh, yeah." She's so sad, and she's like, there is something coming out of her mouth. So we know that once again, Christina was close enough to not only hear what was happening on the phone call, but actually see her mother in this state close up. Now, at some point, Russell asks Christina to please go into the bedroom. But that is the first time throughout the entire 911 call that you hear him attempt to get Christina out of the room. Now, as a parent, I think this would have been one of my first concerns. I would not want my child or any child to have to see their mother like that. But like I said, hearing this 911 call, I do feel bad for Russell. I don't know what I would do in that situation, and he seems genuinely distressed, overwhelmed, scared. Now, I want to point out one small thing before we move on and put a pin in this because it's going to come back up later. When Russell called 911, he called Stephanie his wife. She was not his wife. They had been together for several years. They shared a child together. They lived together, but Stephanie and Russell Peterson were never married. I should get like a little bulletin board and put it next to me for all the things that we have to put pins in, but put a pin in that. So at the time of Stephanie's death, the Sedona Police Department was They were pretty new. They'd only been established for 5 years. They were relatively new to murder investigations or any kind of investigations, honestly. And as a young agency in a rapidly growing tourist town, the department was still developing its investigative experience and infrastructure. That is a factor that I believe would shape how the case unfolded in its earliest moments, which many would argue are the most important moments in any police investigation. So by 2:18 a.m., Christina, Nicole, and Russell had all been escorted out of the house. By 2:50 a.m., the police had contacted the Yavapai deputy county attorney to tell them that they could have a potential homicide investigation. Steve Janes, who was on call at the county attorney's office that night, said he would contact their investigator, Gary Saravo, and have him contact the police. Now, Gary Saravo would soon call back, and he told the police he would go to the scene. At 4:41 a.m., Detective Walter Spokes and Gary Saravo from the county attorney's office, they interviewed 3-year-old Christina at the Sedona Police Department. And Christina was asked a lot of questions. Her interview was not recorded, most likely because she was a minor, but I want to read it to you, the transcript from the police files. Okay, so Detective Walter Spokes and Detective Gary Saravo, they ask Christina how old she is, does she know what her last name is, and then they ask her Why does she have scratches? What happened to her arm? She has got some, scratches on her arm. And then they say, you have a cat that scratched you right there? And Christina answers, mm-hmm. And then the police say, boy, cat scratches hurt, don't they? And Christina responds, yeah. Then the detectives talk to her a little bit more about the cat scratches. Did it hurt? You have a puppy. What's your puppy's name? She says Sunshine. She says her mother named the puppy. Does he bite? She says no. And then they say, he's a nice little dog. Were you at home tonight? Christina responds, uh-huh. And then the police ask Christina, what happened at home tonight? And Christina answered, my mother died. They then ask her, she did? What happened? How did she die? And Christina said, quote, my dad killed her, end quote. The police ask, how did your dad kill her? Christina says, quote, with a gun, end quote. The police say, he killed her with a gun? Tell me about it. And then Christina says, quote, he killed her with a gun and then she bleeded, end quote. The police ask Christina, did you see that? Christina responds in what the transcript says, garbled, and then, quote, she was dead. The police then ask Christina, where were you sleeping at? And she responds, quote, I was sleeping in my room. They ask her, where is your room? Her response is garbled. They ask her, is it by your mom's room? Her response is garbled. At least that's what they're putting in the transcript. The police then say, tell me what you heard and what you saw. Christina responds, quote, I saw her bleed, end quote. The police then ask Christina, you saw her bleed? Did you see your dad shoot her? Christina responds, mm-hmm. And then the police say, quote, no, you didn't. Was there fighting or anything that you know of? End quote. Now, I have a problem with that. I'm going to stop here because they ask Christina, you saw your mother bleed? Did you see your dad shoot her? Christina responds back affirmatively, mm-hmm. And then the police say to her, quote, no, you didn't. What? And then they ask her, was there fighting or anything that you know of? Christina responds, quote, they were fighting, end quote. The police ask Christina, what were they saying? Tell me about their fight. In the transcript, it says Christina's response is garbled. They then ask her, what did you say? Again, in the police report, it says that Christina's response is garbled. The police then ask Christina, what happened? Do you know what happened there? In the police transcript, it says her response is garbled. I have to believe that in general, it wasn't so garbled that they didn't know what Christina was saying, but whoever transcribed this interview, because it was taped, we just don't have the recording of it, whoever transcribed it, they did, maybe they just didn't know what she was saying, but the police did. So then the police say to Christina, how did he kill her with a gun? Christina responded, quote, you take a bullet and then he killed her, end quote. The police ask Christina, did you see that? You saw that? Christina responds, quote, but I didn't see, I was sleeping, end quote. The police say to her, you were sleeping? She responds, uh-huh. The police say to her, tell me what you saw. Christina says, quote, I was asleep and then garbled, Papa killed her, end quote. The police ask Christina, how did you see Papa kill her? Christina said, quote, she had blood all over her room, end quote. Once again, the police ask, how did you see your father kill her? And then Christina responds, Papa didn't kill her, Papi did. And they get confused because I think what's confusing is that Christina called her father, Russell Peterson, Papi, and they kept asking her Papa. And she's saying, no, it wasn't Papa, it was Papi. So then the police say, Papi did? Papi killed her? And Christina responds, quote, because I was sleeping in my own room. Then they ask her another question that in the transcript it says garbled. And then Christina says, quote, then I comed out and the light and blood all over. There was blood, my rug, end quote. The police then say to her, did you see that? Did you see anybody shoot her? And Christina responds, no. The police then say to her, no, where were you at? Christina says, quote, I was in my room sleeping, end quote. They then ask her, did you hear anybody fighting? Christina says, no. The police then say, did you hear any gunshots before that? Christina says, quote, but I just heard the gun, end quote. The police ask her, how many times did you hear the gun? Christina's response is garbled. The police say, how many times? 1 time or 2 times or 3 times or 4 times. Christina answers 1 time. And then Papa took the gun and her remainder of her sentence is garbled. And they say to her, who did? And she says, Papi. And they say, Papi, who is Papi? And she says, quote, that's my father, end quote. The police then ask Christina, and what did he do with the gun? And Christina says, quote, he killed my mom, end quote. The police then say he did. How many times did he do the gun? Christina's response is garbled. The police ask again, how many times? Her response is garbled. The police say 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. And Christina says, quote, 1 time. The police say, quote, 1 time, that's all you heard it? And then Christina's response is garbled. The police ask her again, how many times did you hear it? Christina responds, 1 time. They then ask Christina, then what? And Christina responds, quote, Papi killed her, end quote. The police ask Christina, how do you know Papi killed her? Christina responds, quote, because my mother was dead and Papi killed her, end quote. The police ask her, do you know that's your secret? Her response is garbled. The police then say, well, I need to know about your secrets. And Christina says, quote, because I had a bad dream about it, end quote. The police then ask Christina, what did you do when you were in mommy's room? Christina said, quote, I walked in there, end quote. The police say, when you walked in mommy's room, what did mommy look like? Christina says, quote, she was dead, end quote. The police say, already dead when you walked in there? Where was daddy at? And then Christina said, quote, he was in mommy's room, end quote. I think once again, this is some evidence that maybe Russell and Stephanie were not sleeping in the same room consistently enough for Christina's daughter, who was 3, to refer to the master bedroom as mommy's room. Then the police ask, where was the gun at? And Christina responds back, in the closet, I mean, he got it out. The police say the gun was in the closet. Was he holding it? And Christina responds, uh-huh. Then the police say it was in the closet and daddy got it out, and Christina says yes. Then the police say, what did he say? Talking about Russell. And Christina says, quote, he said that he shot the gun, then he cried, end quote. The police say, he said what? And then Christina said, quote, he said that it's hopeless and he cried, end quote. The police ask her, it's hopeless? Christina says, mm-hmm. And the police say, and he cried? Christina says, mm-hmm. Then the police ask her, was he already in the room when you went in there? Christina then says, mm-hmm. They ask her, where was he standing at or sitting at? And she responds in something that's garbled. She's talking about her mom. And then the police ask her, okay, come here. What is this? And Christina responds, quote, mommy was in the corner, end quote. And then the police say, come on, you show me where mommy was at. This is the room. This is the closet right here, right here. This is the closet. Where was mommy at? And then Christina responds, she was in that corner, the gun in the closet. And then the police tell Christina, you show us where mommy was, like where mommy was. And then the police say to Christina, who remember is just a little girl, she's 3 years old, they say, quote, lay down like where you think. Show me where mommy was. Just lay down like where mommy was. When you go in where the door is over there. Where was mommy at? End quote. That's what they ask her. So first of all, I've got problems with this interview already. It continues on, and basically she keeps answering kind of the same things. They ask, was your dad holding the gun or was the gun just lying in the closet? She says daddy was holding the gun. They say, was it in the closet first before he was holding it, or was he just holding it? She says he took it out of the closet. They keep asking her, where was your mom? Was she on the floor already when you went in there? You can tell Christina's getting upset because she just keeps repeating, there was blood. She's getting very confused. There was absolutely no reason that these police officers should have even been interviewing 3-year-old Christina. They should have brought somebody in who was trained to interview a child in a very traumatic moment and experience like this. I do not like that when she first says that she saw her father shoot her mother, the response of the police is, no, you didn't. Right off the bat, I don't like that. I don't like that they're basically, having Christina show them where her mother was when she walked in, and they're almost kind of guiding her. Like, here's the closet right here. This is the closet. You see, this is where the closet is. Where was your mom? And then they actually ask her to lay down and show them where her mother was. Like, show her how her mother was and where she was. This is very bad. And they're sort of guiding her to tell them basically what I think they want to hear. And it's just very problematic. Christina should have never been interviewed at that point by these people. She should have been interviewed by somebody who was trained to interview a child after this child has seen their mother lying dead on the floor. And she should not have been asked these repeated questions in this way over and over and over again until they got the answers that they wanted from her. So right off the bat, you can tell this is a newer police department. They don't really know what they're doing with this murder investigation. They don't know how to handle questioning a child who is 3 and who has just witnessed something very, very traumatic, whether she witnessed her father shooting her mother or whether she just witnessed her mother being dead and blood being all over. It's really bad. So after Christina and Nicole were talked to by the police, they were both placed with DES, and Russell Peterson said he was okay with having the girls go to a foster home temporarily so that they could get some sleep. At this point, Nikki had still not been told what had happened, besides hearing what her sister had said in the back of the police car. Russell Peterson would have several interviews with the police, the first of which took place at 5:42 a.m. on July 9th, 1993.
Russell, we're here to talk about the events of the night involving the death of your wife. Were you married?
Been together for 6 years, 6.5 years.
Russell told the police that he and Stephanie had shared a bottle of wine that night, but he was not intoxicated or impaired in any way. They asked him to walk them through the events of July 8th, and Russell said that they both got up around 11:30, quarter to 12, and he said that they both got up at the same time.
Well, the events of the day, they're pretty consistent and easy. I mean, I get up, we drink some coffee, we go to work. She's the pastry chef at the restaurant where I am the chef of. It's at Pietro's restaurant, and we work real well together. We go into work at 12:30. We can check her time card when she got there. She takes care of all the desserts. I take care of all the other things that go on in the restaurant.
Russell said that Stephanie left work around 5:30, quarter to 6, and he left at 11 p.m., at which point he went home and took a shower. Now, you could hear in that past clip that Russell gave sort of a general statement about what he and Stephanie would do on a morning where they were both working. The police asked him to then go over what happened when he got home from work that night, and Stephanie was already there. And they are literally going to say, "Let's get detailed now." And Russell Peterson is going to repeat the word detailed like he understands what they're asking him to do.
Why don't we get detailed, ma'am?
Okay.
About what happened then. Go on, just give me a narrative.
Well, detailed, I come home, I give her a kiss, I go, how's everything? And she has a tendency sometimes to be a little aggressive because she's home with the kids and all this. I go into the shower, I come back out, we sit, we talk, we go to bed, and the next morning happens.
Once again, after he was asked to talk in detail about that night, the night that Stephanie ended up shot in the neck, Russell Peterson gives a general statement about what they usually do on an average night when he comes home from work. He even says they go to bed and the next morning happens, which is clearly not what happened on the night of July 8th because Stephanie was killed. Now, right away, it felt to me like this was Russell trying to deflect, trying to avoid saying something specific that would then lock him into a narrative he could be questioned about later.
What happened last night when you got home?
You're talking about this night.
Yes, Russell, you're in the police station talking to the police because your girlfriend is dead. I'm pretty sure they want you to talk about the night it happened, not just a night in the life of Russell Peterson. So Russell said that he had gotten a ride home from someone called Susie, another employee at Pietro's, and he's talking about a woman named Susie Corbett. The police would later also speak to Susie, and she confirmed that her boyfriend had driven both herself and Russell Peterson home from Pietro's on the night of July 8th. This happened around 11:15 p.m. The police wanted to know if there was anything going on between Susie and Russell because at this point, they're trying to figure out a motive. They wanted to know what triggered the fight between Russell and Stephanie that night. Russell told them there was nothing going on with him and Susie, and actually Susie and Stephanie were good friends. Susie Corbett would confirm this as well, and she had actually talked to Stephanie several times during the day of July 8th. Susie was actually planning to get off work early that night so that she could go to Stephanie's house to pick up Nikki and Christina. They were going to stay overnight with her so that Stephanie and Russell could have that alone time that Stephanie had talked to her sister Wendy about. Unfortunately, someone didn't show up to work that day, and so those plans fell through when Susie had to stay to cover that shift. Susie claimed that Stephanie had been upset at work that day, and Susie knew that Stephanie had not been happy with Russell because he'd been working too much and didn't pay enough or any attention to Stephanie and the children. Stephanie was also stressed about money and Russell's upcoming trip. We're going to talk about that in a minute, so don't worry. Susie was asked what Stephanie was like, and she said that Stephanie had a strong personality and was known to cut straight to the point, sometimes in a vulgar way, but she had never heard Stephanie threaten Russell Peterson, and she had never seen Russell get angry with or threaten Stephanie. Okay, now let's hear Russell try to talk specifically about the night of June 8th when he got dropped off at home by Susie Corbett and her boyfriend.
I get home, I give Steffi a little kiss.
She's sitting on the couch.
She's sitting on the couch. I have a bottle of wine. I have a bottle of Jordan Cabernet. I go into the shower. I take a shower. I
Did
come.
you guys have this bottle of wine before you went to the shower?
I brought it home.
You brought it home.
Yeah.
Did you drink it then and take a shower or just brought it home?
No, I brought it home. I set it on the table. She had already been drinking something, whatever it was. So I go into the shower. I come back out. At this time, we're talking about 11:15, 11:30. Okay. I'm sitting next to her on the couch. I open the bottle of wine. She has a glass. I have a glass. We drink it, and there becomes a confrontation. She tells me that she talked with father. So she tells me that she talked with him for about 2 hours, 2.5 hours, whatever it was, and had a nice conversation with him. Fine and dandy, no big deal. It becomes a little confrontational. Why? I don't know why.
On your part or her?
On her part. I don't know why. You know what it is? I was accepted. I was the 9th or 10th accepted to go to Cornell University, which we can go to my house right now. I can show you my plane tickets, my agenda. I'm going there for a taste of the Cordon Bleu, which is a professional advanced program for chefs.
Okay, where's that?
That's in Ithaca, New York.
Okay, now where is it start located at your house?
It's sitting right on the mantle.
Okay.
My plane tickets, everything.
Okay.
And ever since she knew about that, she has felt like, well, why you and not me?
Did she apply? Or do you have to understand, neither one, I'm not a chef.
Okay, no. What I mean is the fact of,
How do you get to this point?
I've done this for 15 years.
Okay, do you have to apply for this?
I applied for that. I called them up. I saw it in the ass end of a Food and Art magazine. I called them up. They sent me an application. I filled it all out. I sent back my application, and after being reviewed, because I mean it's a $4,000 course.
Okay.
Just because you may have the money to pay for it doesn't mean you're accepted. They want professional people. So I get a call back, Russell, you've been accepted. It is. I won't say it's created a confrontation, but it's been like I said, why you, why not me? Well, for 15 years, I basically learned this from the get-go. No formal training, no nothing.
Did she apply?
No, she did not apply.
Okay.
And so I was accepted, and I am supposed to leave. So my father's gonna come and pick me up, or supposed to come and pick me up Saturday. I leave at 11:30 at night, Saturday night. I fly from Phoenix to Pittsburgh. I arrive in Pittsburgh at 6:30. I leave Pittsburgh at 8:30, and I arrive in Ithaca at 9:30. And I'm there for 2 weeks.
It's a 2-week course.
It's a 2-week course.
Okay, so it's not like you're going to be gone for.
No, it's a 2-week course.
Okay.
It's a 2-week course.
Okay, so things are becoming a little bit confrontational then.
Very minute.
Okay.
I mean, it all depends on kind of how she is at any given point in time.
Okay.
There's a lot of things to break down now, and we're going to break them all down. So Russell says he brings home a bottle of Cabernet from the restaurant, Pietro's. He takes a shower, and then he opens the wine and sits on the couch next to Stephanie as they share this bottle of wine and chat. Stephanie then tells him about her long phone call with her ex-boyfriend and Nicole's father, Craig Daly. Russell says this doesn't upset him. No big deal. He says that it does become a little confrontational on her part, and at first he tells the police that he doesn't really know why. Like, Stephanie is just mad out of the blue. And then he says, hey, actually, you know what it is? I have an idea, guys. It's this trip I'm going on for 2 weeks, which I'm leaving for in like a day and a half. Stephanie really isn't happy about the trip, and she's kind of feeling like, why is she not getting this opportunity? Why is it me and not her? Now let's go over the actual details of this trip according to Russell. He says he was the 9th or 10th accepted to go to Cornell University for a Taste of Cordon Bleu, which is a 2-week professional advanced program for chefs. Russell talks about his stats, right? He's been a chef for 15 years, self-made, no training, no education. He said he found out about this program in the Food and Arts magazine. He called them the college, I'd assume, not Food and Arts magazine, and then they sent him an application. He applied, and after his application was reviewed, Cornell called him back and said, you got in, you were accepted. Russell says that it's a $4,000 course, but don't get it twisted. You can't just be anyone and pay the money and get in. They want professional people. Let's talk about what's true and able to be fact-checked about Russell's statements, and then let's talk about what might be something of a creative embellishment on his part. We already know from Susie Corbett's police statement that Stephanie was in fact not happy about Russell flying off for 2 weeks, but Susie also said that Stephanie's unhappiness came from a financial burden. We also will hear from Peter Korn, who talked to the police. Peter Korn was Russell and Stephanie's boss at the restaurant Pietro's. Peter Korn was clearly super tight with Russell, so he would end up supporting him quite a bit throughout the investigation. And Peter told the police that he didn't want to speak negatively about Stephanie or anything, but from what he could see at work, Stephanie and Russell's relationship was always argumentative, and it always seemed like Stephanie was the one causing the problem. Peter Korn had never heard Russell talk about Stephanie in a negative way or even say anything mean to her, but Stephanie spoke to Russell in a very detrimental manner, especially when it came to how much time Russell spent at work. In the police report, it says, quote, Korn advised that she was very annoyed and appeared distraught because Russell was so wrapped up in his work. She taunted him quite often at work and, according to other employees, did get quite disturbed on Thursday. According to Korn, Stephanie was quite often talking about her miserable life and the problems that she was having at home, end quote. Peter Korn, who had a lot to say, also told police that Stephanie was very straightforward and coarse, while Russell was calm and quiet, and Stephanie was jealous of Russell's success. Catherine Dindler, a coworker who knew both Russell and Stephanie, told the police that she had seen Stephanie at 5 p.m. that night. Catherine was just getting into work and Stephanie was getting in her car to leave. She said that Stephanie was not having a good day, and she had asked Catherine to talk to Russell about the upcoming trip. She said that she had never seen physical violence between Russell and Stephanie, and although Stephanie was always pushing Russell's buttons, he would always just ignore her threats and would not respond. Kay Ellen Gant, a friend of both Stephanie and Russell's, described her relationship with Stephanie as being very close, almost like sisters, and she described Stephanie as a good girl with a lot of sad internal pain. Gant acknowledged that Stephanie was a little resentful of Russell's success, but mostly she was upset because Russell seemed married to his work and did not pay enough attention to Stephanie. The police would also speak to members of Stephanie's family. Her sister, Kathleen, told police that she and Stephanie were close, they talked on the phone often, and she would go to Sedona once every few months to visit. Kathleen said that Stephanie had become increasingly unsure and unhappy over the last 6 months, and she'd been thinking about leaving Russell, but she was hesitant, even though Kathleen had offered her help. Kathleen said that Stephanie had told her that Russell was physically abusive, but she had never witnessed any incident of abuse between them when she was in Sedona for her visits. When asked if Stephanie was jealous or resentful of Russell's success, Kathleen said that her sister had no career goals or further aspirations outside of being a mother. Stephanie's mother, Bernice, or B, told the police that the last time she had talked to Stephanie had been about 10 days prior to her death because they'd been making plans for a trip to Disneyland with the kids. B told detectives that the relationship between her daughter and Russell was not smooth, and she described Russell as being both physically and emotionally abusive, with Stephanie telling her on more than 50 occasions that Russell had been abusive towards her. Stephanie's sister Wendy also confirmed hearing physical abuse allegations about Russell from her sister, and Stephanie's brother Lance told the police the same, adding that his sister had tried to make the relationship work. Lance claimed that 3 years prior, when Stephanie and Russell still lived in Phoenix, he'd been at their apartment and he'd witnessed Russell shoving Stephanie while yelling and screaming at her. Lance had intervened and prevented the altercation from going any further at that point. Okay, so we have verification from third parties that Stephanie was not happy about Russell going on this trip to Cornell University for what he called a taste of Le Cordon Bleu, and that the relationship seemed to have been troubled and not going well. But I have questions about this Cornell University 2-week course that was supposedly called A Taste of Le Cordon Bleu. You may know that I live in New York, and I've actually been taking a lot of trips to Cornell recently because, as many of you may remember, my dog Rosie has been sick, and Cornell has a great animal veterinarian program, and they happen to be the only place around that offers the specific treatment that Rosie needs. Some of you may not know, but Cornell is a very prestigious university. It is an Ivy League institution and is consistently ranked among the top universities in the United States. By the early 1990s, Cornell already had a long-established reputation for elite academics and highly respected professional programs in law, medicine, engineering, agriculture, and hotel administration. Now, Le Cordon Bleu also has a great deal of prestige. It's a culinary institution founded in Paris in 1895, and it's known for classical French cooking instruction. It's also well known that Le Cordon Bleu has grown to a network of international campuses and culinary programs, so it kind of made sense when I first heard this that Cornell and Le Cordon Bleu might collaborate to offer professional chefs a taste of Le Cordon Bleu, so to speak. So I talked to some people at Cornell. And then I talked to more people in admissions, people at the Nolan School of Hotel Administration, people in the food science department, people all over Cornell University. And I did some of my own research. What I found out is that there was no official Le Cordon Bleu program based out of Cornell University in 1993 or at any other time. Cornell did not host a Le Cordon Bleu campus or run official Le Cordon Bleu programs as part of its academic programs. And Le Cordon Bleu didn't even establish a formal educational presence in the United States until 1999 when it opened its first campus at the Brown Institute in Minneapolis. 1993 program records show that Cornell's School of Hotel Administration offered various short-term executive education courses, as well as summer sessions, but none of them are listed as being offered in partnership with Le Cordon Bleu. I also found out that if Cornell had been hosting a 2-week program in 1993, and they'd officially called it A Taste of Le Cordon Bleu, or A Taste of the Cordon Bleu, as Russell said, they would have almost certainly needed permission because using that exact name, the one Russell gave the police, would definitely risk trademark infringement and be considered false advertising. And since Cornell is and was a major Ivy League institution with their very own law school, I can't imagine they would have made such a costly and rookie mistake. Now, what I also found out is Cornell did offer intensive professional development courses for industry veterans under something called the Professional Development Program, the PDP, and these would consist of 1 to 2 week courses focusing on advanced food and beverage management, as well as kitchen operations. They also offered summer sessions and adult university classes through their School of Continued Education. And some of these classes would often include culinary themes. Additionally, the adult university programs, the continuing education, they would also be offered in 1 or 2 week courses, and they would sometimes feature specialized topics such as classic continental cuisine or French food and wine. So maybe Russell Peterson was taking a 2-week course through the professional development program, and I'm leaning more towards that, not so much the summer or continuing education courses. But Russell was really laying it on thick when he was talking to the police. He's name-dropping Cornell, a well-known Ivy League university, and making it seem like entrance into this program was very difficult to achieve, like this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, the way a student applying to the actual university would feel their acceptance there was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and it would put them in a small percentile of people who had what it took to be lucky enough to be able to attend. And then he says he found out about the Cornell program from Food and Wine magazine. Now, I looked more into it. Cornell's Professional Development Program, the PDP, it was designed for working professionals, and you would have to fill out an application with your resume stating years of experience and a work history to show that you were actually a working professional at the time. But it really wasn't so much about acceptance as being eligible, like having eligibility that would give you the approval to be able to pay for that course and go, right? The courses were run on specific dates and had limited seating, and the PDP would also advertise these paid courses in magazines like Food and Wine. So what it looks like is all Russell actually had to do was show them he had the required amount of experience, which was usually 3 to 5 years, enroll for a session that had space, and then pay for the course. Now, you might be wondering why I've spent so much time focusing on this, and you know I'm going to tell you to put a pin in it because we will come back to it. But basically, what I'm trying to say is whatever course Russell was running off to Cornell to be a part of, it had nothing to do with Le Cordon Bleu, and it would not have been advertised as such. It also wouldn't be a once-in-a-lifetime experience, and it would have been very expensive. As we heard from people who had talked to Stephanie, she was mad at Russell for going on this trip because he'd be gone for 2 weeks and because of how much it cost and how they were already financially strapped. And in later interviews, you're going to hear Russell talk about this and address it as well. I guess what I'm trying to show you is Russell's making it seem like to the police that this was such a huge experience for him and just not anybody can get in, and Stephanie was jealous of him because he was given this opportunity and not her. When in reality, if Stephanie had wanted to fly off to Cornell University for 2 weeks, she could have just filled out an application, shown she had experience as a pastry chef at a restaurant where she was working, pay $4,000, and then, get on a plane and go. It wouldn't have been something she was like, why is he good enough to get this, but not me? What may have been something Stephanie was legitimately upset about was, hey, you don't really need to go to this. We don't have the money for it right now. They offer these courses all the time throughout the year and during the summer. In fact, I found out that the professional development school or the professional development program was more apt to offer these courses in the summer because that's when their regularly enrolled students wouldn't be on campus, and so they'd have more space and they would bring in more money for the school during the off season when most of the normal college kids weren't there. And she might have been saying, you don't really need to do this right now. You can go at another time. You can go next summer. We don't really have the money for it right now, and I find it difficult to understand why you're leaving me and the kids without you getting a paycheck for 2 weeks and you taking a lot of money that is our household money out of the bank accounts to use it for this and flying away and going to Cornell at a time when we're really not financially doing well enough for you to do this and you could just go at another time. That's what I think Stephanie would be probably more upset about, but we'll talk about that later. For right now, let's return to Russell's documented series of events that went down right after he got out of the shower on the night of July 8th, 1993.
I'm out of the shower. I come out of the shower. We're sitting there, step by step. We talk. Okay. She's on the left-hand side. I'm in the center of the couch. We're talking. It becomes a little heated, but nothing that a relationship hasn't had happen in the past. So I didn't think anything of it. I've had this 44 Magnum that my father gave to me as a gift for over 2.5 years. It sits up in the closet. I've only taken it out once to go shooting, which is like Lower Red Roof Road, and you can pull off to the side. Me and the son of Emil, who owns Coffee Cup. we went over there. He had a couple of shotguns, rifles. I had this. He had a 45. Only time it's ever been shot. But it's been loaded and it's been sitting up there.
Is it completely loaded?
It was completely loaded
Okay.
with a hollow point Bonacci Italian bullets in it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I really thought that Russell was going to actually get into the timeline of that night and answer the police officer's questions to him, but he got derailed again pretty early on in, once again, him trying to answer their direct question. And he starts talking about the gun. So since Russell wants to talk about the gun, let's talk about this random loaded gun that he had in the house, which he claims he only used once. And then he put it in the bedroom closet, fully loaded, on a shelf, and that's where it stayed, under some of Stephanie's clothes. Since Russell wants to talk about this gun, let's talk about the gun. It was a Ruger Red Hawk 44 Magnum double action revolver. And this is a serious firearm, okay? Not one you would just casually have around your house because your dad randomly gave it to you as a gift, even though you allegedly don't even like guns and never use them. In his second police interview, which is going to happen the following day, Russell said he's shot a gun twice in his life. So that's a weird gift for your father to give you. I mean, a gun, I think, is a weird gift to give someone at all, much less this specific gun. And it's especially a weird gift if the person you're giving it to has only ever touched a gun twice in their life. But whatever. Okay, the Ruger Red Hawk Magnum is a big gun. It's heavy, it's extremely loud, and it produces massive recoil. This is not your everyday home protection handgun. It's actually primarily used for wilderness defense, like for people working in remote wilderness areas where they might have to protect themselves against a big-ass bear or a mountain lion, like a park ranger, okay? It's designed to deliver deep penetration and massive stopping power, which is obviously complete overkill for most home defense situations unless a mountain lion picked your locks at night and came to attack you in your bed. Like I said, this is a big gun, a heavy gun, and it requires a firm two-handed grip for most shooters. Most people, okay? Unless you're a giant and your hand is huge and very strong. Now, before we go back to Russell Peterson's interview, let me tell you what the medical examiner wrote after performing Stephanie's autopsy. Gunshot residue was found on one of Stephanie's hands, her left hand, but the gunshot residue was found on her palm and the webbing of her fingers, right? This part between your fingers, the webbing. Not only that, Stephanie was right-handed, not left-handed. Based on all of this and more, the medical examiner said he felt that the presence of the gunshot residue on Stephanie's left hand and where it was located indicated a defensive posture, someone holding their non-dominant hand up to protect themselves from something like, I don't know, a big-ass gun being pressed into their neck. It would have already been nearly impossible for Stephanie to have shot that gun with one hand, much less her non-dominant hand. So after her death, the Sedona police, they took measurements of Stephanie's hands and arms, like the distance between her elbow and her wrist and how big her hand was, and they attempted to recreate Stephanie's ability to handle and fire this gun one-handed. We're going to talk about it more in depth later, but spoiler alert, they couldn't recreate it. It wasn't possible. And we've got Russell telling us that this gun was loaded with hollow point bullets, which, excuse me, but what the hell? Why? Why? Hollow points, first of all, are not only not standard ammo for Red Hawk revolvers, but they're designed to expand on impact. They reduce over-penetration, which means it's going to reduce the likelihood that the bullet will pass through its target and continuing to travel with enough energy to hit something else. They're also designed to cause more tissue disruption at close range. Basically, they're designed to do more damage. Now, for animal defense, hollow points are actually considered inferior because they don't penetrate deeply enough into something like a 400-pound black bear. So why would someone in the early 90s choose to use hollow points in their gun, in this gun specifically? Well, because at that time, people were being told that this type of ammo was safer for indoor use because there was less likelihood of it going through walls and hurting someone else in a different room of the house or a different apartment, like if you share a wall with another apartment, which isn't actually true because hollow points in a Magnum revolver can still actually end up over penetrating and going further because of the power of the gun. But either way, why these bullets? Like, you don't touch guns, you don't like guns, or you don't like them enough to use them on an everyday basis or a regular basis. You didn't even get this gun, according to you, it was a present from your father, and you decided to bring this gun home, leave it loaded with hollow point bullets, and then just put it in the closet, maybe in case a burglar broke in and needed to be taken out in the way that an angry black bear would be. I don't get it. But okay, back to Russell, who's finally going to lay out for us what happened that night. Finally.
She goes into the bed. She goes into the bedroom. And she comes back out. She has the gun in her hand. And she knocks it back. And she goes, Russell, I'm going to shoot you.
Hold on, I'm actually going to interrupt again because I want to clarify something. I have told you that this weapon was a double action revolver, and some of you who know a thing or two about guns might be screaming at the screen right now. Russell said she cocked the gun. In a double action revolver, you don't have to cock the gun because the action of pulling the trigger cocks the hammer, rotates the cylinder, and releases the hammer. I think that's probably why they call it double action, whereas you can do one thing that will perform both actions, cocking and firing the gun. Now, you don't have to cock this type of gun, but you can. If you don't cock the gun, the trigger pull is going to be long and heavier, between 10 to 14 pounds. So if the person holding the gun manually pulls the hammer back with their thumb, aka cocking the gun, the trigger pull is going to be shorter and lighter, between 3 to 5 pounds. But doing this would require familiarity with the firearm. And as you will come to find, every single person who knew Stephanie Wasilishin will say that she hated guns to the most extreme level. Her ex-boyfriend Craig said that Stephanie had never touched a gun in her life, and he said, quote, she was never in the frame of mind to grab a gun. We had gone out shooting many times with friends of mine, and she would sit in the truck. She had absolutely no interest. I don't even think she could shoot one, much less with her left hand with a .44 Magnum revolver. That's a two-hand, better know what you're doing gun, end quote. Remember Stephanie's old friend from grade school in Phoenix, Lori Swift? Here's what she had to say about it. Quote, in 1987, my ex-husband had borrowed 3 guns from Craig. I tried to get Stacy to take the guns back to Craig's home. She refused because Nikki Lee was in the car. See, I offered to put the 3 unloaded guns in the trunk, and she told me to F off, Swift. Stacy loathed guns. She would never grab a gun to make a point, end quote. Even some random guy named James Mayer that had gone to high school with Stephanie in 1979 called the police after hearing what happened, and he said that he didn't feel Stephanie would shoot anyone or handle a gun in any manner.
Well, she goes, Russell, I'm going to shoot you. Then I put my hands up and said, yes, what are we talking about here? And I don't think her intentions truly were to shoot me as opposed to maybe a fright factor.
What did you think at that point in time? I mean, do you think she's just screwing around? Or you think, what is going on here? You tell me what you think of my...
No, I've been with her for 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I kind of felt that she was screwing around, maybe a little more than screwing around, because it's been sitting up there untouched. And now she goes and picks it up. And I mean, she's got the hammer cocked back and she's fucking pointing at me.
It's pointed at you.
It's pointed at me.
And you're sitting
where I'm sitting in the center of the couch.
Okay.
Okay. So now she fires it. And like I said, I wouldn't be here if it would have hit me. I'm sure you saw the bullet in the curtains, wherever it hit, in the wall.
Did she fire it at you or above you, or what? How did she?
It was above me.
Do you think it was purposely above you, or she just missed you?
It was probably purposely above. If she wanted to hit me, she would have hit me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So after this interview, the police would bring Russell back to the house so that he could change and they could collect his clothing for evidence. He was wearing a pair of cotton underwear. an extra large pair of Chicago Bulls gray and red shorts, a blue t-shirt with Lake Yellowstone printed on it, and Nike Air basketball shoes. At this time, once he was redressed, I hope, Russell showed the detectives where he'd been sitting on the center of the couch and where Stephanie had been standing approximately 15 feet away from him, to his left and above him, when she cocked and shot this gun. The police did find a bullet hole in an orange curtain that went through the lace curtain behind it and then went through the wall by the front door. It had entered the wall about 1.5 inches from the window frame and about 4 feet and 4 inches from the floor.
At that point, they said, "Steph, I mean, what are you, crazy? I mean, what's the matter with you?" And she goes walking into the back, into the bedroom, and she cocks it back again, and she goes, "Russell, I'm not guilty."
And where are you at this time?
At this time, I get off the couch and I am following her into the hallway, into the bedroom.
So Russell is saying that Stephanie fired at him once, or fired above his head, after she said she was going to shoot him. She then cocked the gun again and walked into the bedroom, and he followed her, at which point she told him, "Russell, I'm going to kill you." Now for me, this didn't make any sense. If it was me and someone had just shot a .44 Magnum revolver with hollow point bullets anywhere in my vicinity, I'm not following them any goddamn place. Nope, no, I'm running out the front door to the neighbor's house. I'm pounding on doors until someone lets me in, and then I am calling the police, because absolutely not. No, I'm not staying in that house. I'm not following you in any room. Nope. But then I said to myself, Stephanie, you're being very sexist. You're just a scared little woman. You're not brave like Russell. You're not brave like men. So I asked some men. I presented them with this exact scenario. What would you do if you were sitting on the couch and your girlfriend came out with a loaded gun? She said she was going to shoot you. She actually did shoot the gun, and then she cocked it before walking back into the bedroom. And you know what? Not one of them said they would follow their girlfriend into the bedroom. Every single one of them said that they would run. So as it turns out, it's not a man versus woman thing. It's a logical self-preservation thing. A person pointed a loaded gun in your general direction. They showed you that they were not above actually shooting that gun in your general direction. They've also shown you that they cocked the gun, meaning that gun was ready to shoot again as soon as that trigger was pulled. And you follow that same person who just did all of that into the bedroom, away from the exit, away from survival. Who does that? Allegedly, Russell Peterson. Now back to Russell. At this point in the story, both he and Stephanie are in the bedroom. They're standing across from each other, talking, while she's holding a loaded and cocked gun that's ready to shoot again after she already shot it once. They're just going to talk. They're going to have a little chat. "Why are you doing this, Stephanie? What's going on? Why would you do this?"
And we're talking as she is standing right in front of the closets. And, you know, after having one that rang above my head and everything else, I grabbed her hands. And we struggled a little bit. And the next thing I know, it went off and she dropped. And at first, I thought it was, I don't know what went through my mind. Knowing it was accidental, yes. Thinking that it's really not true, yes. And I look down at her and I see her face on the ground and glasses, and I see blood.
How was she faced at that time?
She was face down on the ground, kind of on her side, with her legs somewhat up to her chest. And I looked at her and I didn't believe what happened. I did not believe what happened. And I turned, I looked, I saw down the hallway. I went into the bathroom. I came back out, and I thought, she's going to be up. No, she was not. She was not. And that's when I called 911, and I said, I need help. I need help. There's been an accident. I need help.
Okay, so there's a lot to talk about here, but we aren't going to do that just yet. We're going to recap. Okay, so Russell and Stephanie struggle with the gun. It goes off, she drops. And when Russell looks down, he sees blood. He couldn't believe what had just happened. He panicked. He looked and saw his daughter Christina down the hall. He does not say anything to Christina, apparently. He just goes into the bathroom. All right, so here's a layout of the home drawn by Nikki. So let's go over it. There's a room all the way at the top right that is labeled Christina's room. Next to her room is a bathroom. Next to that bathroom is the master bathroom, and at the bottom right is the master bedroom. You can see that Nikki has marked an X in the master bedroom, which is where her mother's body would be found. You can see that when Christina came out of her bedroom, she would be in a hallway facing the open door of the master bedroom. So Russell looks down at Stephanie's body. He looks back and he sees Christina in the hallway. And then he walks away, not attempting to block Christina's view of her mother's body, not closing the door, not telling her, go back to bed, I'll be right there. He says nothing. He enters the master bedroom through a door in the bedroom. Russell says he then walked out of the bathroom. He sees that Stephanie is still down, and that's when he calls 911. As we will find out, that version of events is not totally accurate, but don't worry, he'll get there eventually. Even the cops at this point are like, wait, what happened? Let's back up and go over it again.
It's back.
Okay.
You go into the bedroom. You cock the pistol again.
It was already cocked
When you went into the bedroom, it was already cocked.
for the second time.
For the
Yes.
second time.
Yes.
And she said, I'm going to shoot you again.
Yes.
And you,
We love each other. I mean, you can talk to people, you can do whatever you want to do. We had a good and semi-bad relationship, just as relationships go. And after the first time, I mean, the gun was never grabbed before. I mean, after 6 years, I mean, it sat up there for a year and a half. It was never grabbed before.
but you go in the bedroom.
Yes.
She already has cocked the gun for a second time.
Yes.
Do you see this? Do you hear this? How do you know?
How do I know? Because after she shot the first time, and I said, Steph, what's the matter with you? She cocked it again the second time, and she turned the alarm off into the bedroom.
Okay, and you followed her in there.
Yes.
Okay. Then what happens? Detail, real detail.
Real detailed. As detailed as I can give you.
How you're facing, how everybody's facing, what is said, everything.
I can't tell you exactly what was said. We were standing in front of the closet,
Facing each other.
facing each other, and she has the gun.
On which hand?
Oh, God. She's right-handed. It had to be a right hand. It had to be a right hand. And she's kind of pointing it around to a certain extent.
Pointed at you or not at you?
Well, I mean, at me, just pointing it around.
Okay.
And I grabbed her.
How did you grab her?
I grabbed her by her wrists.
By her wrist.
Yes.
Okay.
And there was a struggle.
How long was the struggle?
Couldn't have been more than 15 seconds, 20 seconds.
Did you go to the ground? Did you hit the bed?
No, we never hit the ground.
Just right there in front of the closet?
Just right in front of the closet. We never hit the ground.
Did you bend over? Did she bend over? I mean, were you forward or under or just straight up? How were you?
We were standing straight up. Obviously, if there's going to be some kind of a struggle, it happened so fast. It happened so fast. It was never meant to happen. It happened so fast. It shouldn't have been.
Actually, a 15 to 20 second struggle is not really that fast, but giving the benefit of the doubt, Russell may have been in shock. So maybe it felt like 15 to 20 seconds, but it was actually just a couple of seconds. If I stopped talking right now for 15 to 20 seconds and just said nothing and stared at you, you would see how long it was, but I'm not going to do that. By the way, I am taking out the very long pauses in Russell's interview with the police, but there are several very long pauses when Russell is asked certain questions, like when they asked how he was standing, super long pause before he answers. I thought it was interesting when he said, we were standing straight up. Obviously, if there was going to be some kind of struggle, like he's almost mapping it out in his head, coming up with the story as he's being asked the questions, like, how would we be standing if there was some kind of struggle happening? Obviously, we would be standing straight up. How else would a struggle happen unless we were both standing straight up? There's going to be another long extended pause after the police ask him this next question, but I will be cutting it out. Just know that it is there.
Were you trying to get the gun away from her? What was going on?
I don't know. I can honestly look at you and tell you I don't know. Whatever possessed her to pick it up in the first place, I don't know.
We're not talking about the first place. We're talking about the struggle.
The police are like, dude, focus here. We are asking you, why were you struggling with her? What was your intention for the outcome of this struggle? We aren't asking you what she was thinking. Obviously, you don't know that, but you should know what you were thinking, right? That's really what we're asking you. We don't know what Stephanie was thinking. Only Stephanie knows that. And she's dead now. What were you thinking? What was the struggle for?
What were you trying to do? Were you trying to break it up from her hand? Were you just trying to, what were you trying to do?
I was trying to get it out of her hand.
Now, to me, this is bad police work, man. You just gave him the answer. They're like, what were you trying to do? Were you trying to, I don't know, get the gun out of her hand or something else like get the gun out of her hand? And Russell's like, yes, I was trying to get it out of her hand. That's good. What else you got? Got any more answers for me?
Do you have both hands on her hand? Or one hand on each wrist? How were you?
Well, I can't honestly tell you that I can think back and say I know exactly how we were. No, I don't know. All I know is that it went off again, and she dropped.
Where was the gun at?
The gun was in her hand. It's like it was in her. But it was in her hand. I panicked. I didn't believe it. I went into the bathroom. I saw her standing in the hall.
Oh, so now you went into the bathroom and then you saw Christina in the hallway. Okay, I got it now.
I turned back around and I figured, no, Steph, you're just going to stand up. But no, she didn't stand up. Then I got nervous. Very, very nervous. I didn't know what to do. Well, I knew what to do. I mean, but the only thing to do was call 911 and say, I need help. I need an ambulance. There has been a bad accident.
All right, 2 to 2.5 minutes between when Stephanie goes down and Russell calls 911. Based on the phone records that night, this timeline couldn't possibly be true because Russell called his father 4 minutes before he called 911. And according to him, that would have been mid-struggle with Stephanie over the gun if he called 911 2 minutes after she dropped. Oh yeah, also, Russell called his father before he called 911. I don't know if that little detail slipped through while I was going through the timeline. He called 911, even though he claimed during the 911 call that Stephanie really needed help. And he claimed that, of course, he knew what to do after Stephanie went down. He knew he needed to call 911 and get help, right? He's like, I didn't know what to do. I mean, yeah, of course I knew what to do. I have to call 911. There's been a terrible accident. She needs help. But first, before he called to get Stephanie help, he had to call his dad. Maybe he called his dad because he wanted to ask his father why he'd gotten him a big-ass gun as a gift when he'd only touched a gun twice in his life. Maybe that's what he just wanted to know really quick before calling the police. Okay.
From the time of the shooting until you go 911, how long it time should it take?
2.5 minutes at best. 2 minutes.
Okay, Russell touched and moved Stephanie's body a little bit, right? They were going to tell him to do CPR when he called 911 anyways, so no big deal. No big deal. But surely he wouldn't touch the gun.
Okay, then did you ever touch her or the gun after that?
Yes, I did. I picked her up by her head. I saw blood. And after I did that, I said to myself, oh, fuck, she's hurt bad. She needs help. I didn't know what to do. And I didn't want to be accused of murder, of anything like that. picked up the gun. I put it in the holster. I put it back in the closet.
You did what? You picked up the gun, put it back in the holster, and put it back in the closet? What? Was he trying to do some rewind ritual? Like if he put everything back the way it was, time would rewind and then he would look down and Stephanie's body wouldn't be lying there in a pool of blood. You did what, Russell? Also, remember that he says he put the gun back in the holster.
I brought it back down and I said, no, I mean, that's stupid. I mean,
Well, that is stupid. Yeah, that is stupid.
it's happened. There's nothing you can do about it at this point. And I set it back on the ground, and then you guys can.
So if I get this right, you tell me if I'm wrong or missing anything here. You picked her, rolled her over, or whatever, with her head in your hand.
Yes.
Which hand, and how did you roll her, or what did you do?
How did I roll her? What did I do?
Did you pick her up, lift her up, or did you just...
No, if I would have lifted her up, there would have been stuff all over my shirt. I just picked up her head. And I looked and I saw her glasses were cracked. I saw the blood on the ground. And I saw this, it got all in the same.
Then you picked up the gun, put it in the holster?
The gun was laying next to her.
Okay.
I didn't know what to think. I was very nervous.
Mm-hmm.
I put it in the holster. I put it back up in the closet.
Where was the holster at?
The holster was on the floor. The holster was on the floor.
So you put it back in the holster, put it back in the closet.
Up on the shelf.
Okay.
15, 20 seconds passed. I took it back out of the holster. I set it on the ground, and I called 911.
After you called your father.
Did you take it back out of the holster?
Mm-hmm.
You just set it down on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, once they've gotten this disjointed series of events from Russell Peterson, the police now redirect Russell to the whole argument behind this situation, right? They redirect him. What was the reason for this? Why did this gun thing even happen to begin with? They asked him if Stephanie was mad that he'd gotten a ride home from Susie Corbett. They're really focused on this. For a while. They seem to think like maybe something's going on with Susie and Russell, and that's why Stephanie's mad, even though Russell's already said, like, no, there's nothing going on. But I guess, yeah, maybe they don't believe what he's saying at this point, but they're focused on this. Was Stephanie mad you got a ride home from Susie? And once again, Russell says that had nothing to do with it. Susie and Stephanie were friends, and he said Stephanie was already spoiling for a fight by the time he had gotten home.
She's a little snippy and snide, but talk to anybody who knows her. I mean, that's Stephanie. She's spicy. And I'd take a shower. I'd come back out. We'd sit, open the bottle of wine. We'd talk. It happened.
He's going back through it. Shower, wine, talk, and then it happened. Even Russell was like, that series of events I gave was so weird, I'm not even going to try to attempt to remember what I just told these people. It just happened. Please don't ask me for details again. I showered, poured the wine, and then it happened. Okay, the police are going to ask again. If it's not about Susie Corbett, then what is the fight about? And Russell answers, this time, I feel he answers a little bit more honestly.
She feels that I work too much and I put forth more at work than I do at my own life. But the bottom line is, I mean, in a small town like Sedona, I've been lucky to be up here and I make a good dollar doing what I do. Not great, but enough to, put a roof over everybody's heads, food on the table. I mean, the refrige and everything else. And then it developed into maybe I'll be better off when you do go to Ithaca, 2 weeks apart from each other. And, we've never been apart for 6 years. It'll give us both a chance maybe to chill, to relook at a relationship, to do whatever. Just to have a little bit of separation. There's nothing wrong with separation on a limited scale.
I believe this. I believe this conversation happened. Maybe not so diplomatically, but I believe Stephanie was like, okay, I've thought about this. You want to go so bad, then go. If we're not your priority and this is your priority, then go. And maybe this time apart will give me a chance to see what life without you is like. I want you to be home with me, with us, but you never are anyways. So I already feel like I'm single. This will be an opportunity for me to genuinely feel that for an extended period of time and maybe realize that I don't miss you and I don't need you. I don't think Russell liked to hear her say that. She may have not said it so nicely or, like I said, diplomatically. From what we know about Stephanie, she was probably pretty, cutting and straight to the point. And I wonder if he started to think that maybe when he came back home from Cornell University, from Ithaca, Stephanie and Christina and Nicole would no longer be there.
I can't remember the exact conversation. And then she shut. And that, my hands were, come on, Steph, what are we doing here? What are we talking about? Come on. We're friends, we're lovers, we're everything. We work together, we're a perfect mesh and combination of teamwork. There's one Italian restaurant in the whole town, really, and that's Pietro's, since Spice is closed, and if you want to count Hideaway, which is nothing.
Every time the police asked Russell to go back over the series of events, what happened? What was she saying? What were you saying? Where was she standing? Etc. He goes off on some tangent. He does this a lot, and I think it's because he believes if he keeps talking, they're going to forget they asked him about specific details. They'll forget what part of the conversation they're even in. It reminds me very much of arguing with a toxic person. And I think we've all been there at one point. If you haven't, I'm very, very jealous of you. Good for you. Try to stay away from arguments with toxic people. But I looked up if this is called something, like if there's a term for this. And there is a term for it. It's called narrative flooding. And that's when someone responds to direct questions with excessive, loosely related or irrelevant information, creating so much verbal noise that the original question gets lost and the other person becomes exhausted and sometimes confused about what they were even talking about in the first place. I'm sure that Russell has been successful with this technique in the past, with girlfriends, friends, coworkers, etc. Because when someone talks long enough, the listener gets tired, and then interrupting that person feels rude or exhausting, and the momentum of the conversation is completely lost. So whoever's listening just basically wants it to end. There's not a lot of stakes at some point. When you get into a conversation enough with somebody like this, you start to feel like, I don't even care about being right anymore. Like, I just don't want to be this emotionally and mentally exhausted anymore. I just want it to end. However, Russell's not dealing with an ex-girlfriend or a friend or a family member or a coworker. He's dealing with the police, and investigators are usually trained to notice this sort of thing. They notice that narrative flooding increases around high-risk questions, and they're trained to consistently and firmly steer the conversation back to the question at hand. Now, I'm not going to say they're not exhausted or annoyed by this, but they are trained to bring the conversation back to the question, which is what they're going to do in this next clip. They're going to ask Russell two very direct questions. So listen carefully to his answers.
Did you go in there, take the gun from her, and did you shoot her?
No, I did not.
Did she go in there and shoot herself?
No, I won't say she shot herself. And I won't say I shot her.
But it happened during your struggle.
During our struggle.
No, I won't say she shot herself. And he reaffirms that Stephanie was shot during their struggle. He says, no, I won't say she shot herself. And yes, she was shot during the struggle. This is what Russell is saying. So after this first police interview, Russell was asked to sign a consent form giving the police permission to search his house, which he did. Russell also asked if he could call a lawyer, which the police said he could do, and they provided him with phone books for the Sedona and Phoenix areas. He was not limited to the number of calls he could make. He was allowed to use the phone in private, but instead of calling a lawyer, Russell called his father and a friend. So at around 8 a.m., Russell went back to the house on Coffee Pot Drive, accompanied by detectives. This is when he changed into different clothes. He gave the clothing he was wearing to the police to be put into evidence. He grabbed some cash, and then he was brought back to the Sedona Police Department. At that time, investigators began to process the home, taking photos of the interior, the exterior of the house, collecting evidence from inside, including the curtains from the living room, which had a bullet hole through them, a section of drywall from between the window and the front door that had a bullet hole, entry hole through it, various wood fragments collected from the exterior of the home on the front step and walkway, which I would expect came from the wall when the bullet went through it, and a bullet jacket that was embedded in an exterior wall between the front door and window. Then the police entered the master bedroom. The police report states that Stephanie was lying on the floor of the bedroom, in front of the closet. She had an entry wound with powder burns along the left side of her neck and an exit wound at the back of her neck. She was wearing a green nightshirt that was torn at the front, a pair of red underwear, and her red framed glasses were lying on the ground to her right. They were tangled in her hair. The detectives noted light blood spattering on the ceiling and on the wall next to Stephanie. The handgun was lying to Stephanie's right, slightly above her, placed on a holster with 4 loaded cartridges and 2 fired cartridge cases. A small piece of yellow chain with a clasp was found near the door of the master bedroom. The remaining pieces of that chain were collected from alongside Stephanie. Right away, I'm going to tell you that, at least to me, this indicates a struggle. Stephanie's necklace was broken, and the shirt she was wearing was ripped on the front. It tells me that she didn't walk calmly back to the bedroom with a cocked and loaded gun. She was trying to get away from someone who was pursuing her, grabbing at her, breaking her chain at the door of the bedroom, and ripping her nightshirt at some points. So a part of the chain's at the door of the bedroom. The rest of the chain is found still with Stephanie. Various bullet fragments were collected from the top of the TV in the bedroom and from the floor, and at the north bedroom wall, a bullet jacket was removed from a section of drywall. Attached to this bullet jacket were various strands of long hair. And after removing that section of drywall, police said they noticed there was an indentation on the rear section of the adjoining wall. So they checked the insulation, but they were unable to recover more bullet fragments. So a bullet jacket means that when the bullet struck the wall, it was not intact when it was recovered. So the police were able to collect the outer casing of the round from inside the wall, and then the bullet fragments were found on the TV and on the floor under where the bullet struck the wall. So the jacket kept going through the wall, but the insides of the bullet, basically from the impact and the explosion from the gun, came out when the bullet hit the wall. So obviously after going through Stephanie, which is how the bullet jacket came to have strands of her hair attached to it, Stephanie's body was transferred to the Maricopa County Medical Examiner's office for autopsy, and the residence was secured. The police report states, quote, "It should be noted that prior to leaving the residence, the doors were secured and a front door key was taken, later released to Phyllis Peterson," end quote. Phyllis Peterson is Russell Peterson's mother, just for some clarification, and we're going to talk about the keys to the house and the house being secured when the police left. We'll talk about that later. But first, let's talk about what the autopsy revealed. First of all, Stephanie died from a gunshot wound to her neck. It entered the front left side of her neck, and it caused catastrophic injuries. Cervical spine fractures at C3, C4, and C5. A complete transection of the spinal cord at C4, bone fragments displaced into the spinal cord, severe hemorrhage into the neck soft tissue, so on and so forth. Bad news, it did a lot of damage. Now, the wound was a contact gunshot wound, and this was demonstrated by the imprint of the muzzle on her neck, along with soot and black smudging consistent with the barrel being pressed against her skin, and burn marks under her chin consistent with barrel contact. That means that the gun was in direct contact with Stephanie's neck when it was discharged, pressed into her neck. I already told you that Stephanie was right-handed, but the gunshot residue was only found on her left hand, both on the palm and the webbing between her fingers. A detective who was present at the time of the autopsy wrote that The ME, Dr. Philip Keene, verbally told him at that point, quote, it was his opinion that Miss Wasilishin's death was a homicide, and that Miss Wasilishin would have probably had to have held the gun in her left hand to have obtained the angle and location of the entry and exit wounds, end quote. Once the autopsy report was finished, Dr. Keene was consistent with his initial opinions, labeling the manner of death as homicide and stating, quote, the character of the wound is such that it is a contact wound, and the presence of gunpowder residue on the left hand is more consistent with deposition in a defensive posture than with any self-inflicted injury, whether intentional or otherwise, end quote. The angle of the bullet trajectory was from left to right with an upward inclination. So let's answer the question of why all of this fits a defensive posture, as the ME said. With Stephanie's left hand having gunshot residue on the palm and between the fingers on the webbing, with the bullet entering on the left side of her neck at a slightly upward angle, and with the gun making direct contact with her neck when it was fired, it makes more sense that she was raising her non-dominant left hand to either block the weapon or push it away. She would have turned her head or body slightly away and brought her left hand up instinctively. And in that scenario, the left hand is closest to the muzzle, and that hand is exposed to the escaped gases and powder residue. And this lines up with the neck having no gunshot residue despite a contact wound, suggesting the muzzle was obstructed or redirected at the moment of discharge. In this scenario, Stephanie would be standing upright, facing someone in front of her who was very close to her. Her head would be slightly turned to the right, exposing her neck, and her left hand would be raised between her throat and the gun, once again, to either grab the weapon or push it away from her body. I also want to talk about the report of investigator Gary Saravo, what he saw when he walked into that house for the first time around 8 in the morning of July 9th. So Saravo wrote that he saw blood on Stephanie's upper and lower thigh running down. He also saw blood spatter on her right thigh and lower right leg. He also noted that there was blood on the outside of her right hand and some blood on the inside of her right hand. And he saw Stephanie's left hand, with the gunshot residue, was underneath her body. Now, the blood running down her right thigh makes sense with her standing up when she was shot. It's just gravity acting as it does, flowing downward. Blood spatter on the upper and lower right leg is something different because this implies impact or projected blood. Blood traveling from another source and landing on those areas, not dribbling down. Given what we know, that the wound was to her neck and the trajectory of the bullet was upward, this suggests that Stephanie was upright with her leg, her right leg, positioned forward or exposed at the time that she was wounded. This could support that there was movement at the time of impact, possibly a short struggle or some sort of confrontation. It does not support that she was standing upright, perfectly still. Now let's talk about the blood on the outside and inside of her right hand. And this is more meaningful to me right now because it tells us that her right hand was exposed to blood from multiple angles, which doesn't happen if blood just dripped onto her right hand. It can happen, however, if her right hand was moving at the time that the gun went off. We know that her right hand, her dominant hand, was not firing the gun, but it did seem to be active in some way directly during or after the injury, as if she was moving that hand into a defensive posture, maybe like this, and then she was going to come up like this, right? Now, Gary Saravo also saw Stephanie's left hand under her body. So if her left hand was up near the gun at the moment of discharge, which we know it must have been because it's got gunshot residue on it, and then as Stephanie collapsed or was lowered to the ground, that hand ended up trapped beneath her body, it is consistent with a collapse following a spinal cord transection. But if Stephanie had fired the gun herself, you'd be more likely to see the firing hand near the weapon or extended away, not tucked under her body, right? If she fell like that and she was holding the gun, the weight of the gun is most likely when she loses, the ability to stand, the weight of the gun is going to pull her gun hand, the left hand allegedly, down with her. It's not likely it's going to end up under her body, especially with Russell saying that the gun was by her body when he grabbed it and put it back in the holster and put it back in the closet. This doesn't make any sense. And hopefully, as we go through Russell's further stories of what happened that night as they change and evolve, maybe we can start to make more sense of why Stephanie had blood on her in this way and in this pattern, why her left hand was found under her body, even though she allegedly shot with that hand, even though she was right-handed and not left-handed. But hopefully as we go through, it'll make more sense. Now, the following month, on August 3rd, the police attempted to reenact the shooting to see if it was even possible that Stephanie could have shot herself using that specific gun and her left hand, her non-dominant hand, because spoiler alert, in the next interview and the one after that, Russell's going to be like, you know what, actually, we weren't struggling at all, and I was in the hallway when the gun went off, and I saw her drop from afar while I was walking into the room from the hallway. She did this to herself. So the police are going to try to recreate this, and they used a female police officer, Nancy Wilson, whose hands had been measured, and they were the same size as Stephanie's hands. The report states, quote, "We were unable to have Miss Wilson pull the trigger when we attempted to obtain the same angle of entry." End quote. Okay, that's one thing. Now another thing. The report goes on to say, quote, "Miss Wilson had difficulty pulling the trigger when the gun was fired, one-handed double action. We were able to have the gun discharged when investigator Saravo struggled with Miss Wilson." End quote. So why, if Russell claimed that Stephanie had cocked the gun before entering the bedroom, would police have performed this test with the gun in double action, meaning that the gun's performing both of the cocking and the shooting of the gun? It was not cocked first. Well, maybe they didn't believe Russell's version of events. Maybe because it had already been proven that regardless of single or double action or even hand dominance, at the angle the bullet went in, this reenactment showed that Stephanie could not have pulled the trigger at the same angle, right? That was the first point made, that the female they got with the same hand size as Stephanie was unable to shoot the gun at all with the trajectory and the angle that Stephanie was shot at. If she'd been using her right hand, that angle would not have been possible, and also you'd expect to see gunshot residue on her right hand. If she'd been using her left hand, that angle still would not have been possible based on the angle. So the only way it was possible was if force was exerted on the gun from another person in the middle of a struggle, which is what Russell initially claimed happened, right? But not what he claimed happened afterwards. So it does make sense that the police are trying to see how this gun could have been shot with Stephanie's hand on it in all these possibilities, right? Did she do it herself while he was standing in the hallway and walking into the bedroom? Did it happen while they were struggling? Now, it would make the most sense to do it that way with the struggle, and that would be possible if Russell's story had stayed the same, but it didn't. It didn't. And that's where I'm going to leave you to think on all of that until we get to part 2, where the facts and details continue to shift. More questions appear. Please join me for part 2. This is a very interesting case. There's a lot of issues we need to talk about, and I want to talk about them all with you, and I want to get your opinions on it. But for now, let me know in the comment section what you think about this case so far. Are you familiar with it? I know it definitely needs more awareness. We need more eyes on it. We need more people to become familiar with it. Nikki's been awesome. She's been so very receptive to me, asking a bunch of questions. I got her on Facebook Messenger so that I could ask her questions as they occurred to me as I was writing the script. We've been in constant contact. She's awesome. And, when I started going through this and I heard Russell's first interview before I really got all of the information, I was just kind of trying to see from an unbiased perspective before I knew the issues of the case. Did he sound believable? I kind of thought yeah, that could possibly happen. I could see a gun going off accidentally in a struggle, and I kind of felt bad for him. And then as I went through the next interviews, which we're going to go through next time, I was like, this guy's full of shit. And that's where I am now. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section. Don't forget to like the video if you liked it. Share it if you think it's worth sharing. Go check Nikki out. Subscribe if you haven't already to both me and her. And until next time, stay kind, stay beautiful, stay safe. And I'll see you very, very soon. Bye.
Straight down.